but after 2 MRIs, nothing's showing up. Her insurance company is asked to see my medical records. Should I allow it? I would like to settle and move on. That's from Doug. Doug, that's a very good question, and the key is, you have time. The statute of limitations on any claim is 2 years, so you want to make sure you can only settle it once. You want to make sure when you get there and you get to the time where you're going to do that it's properly at the right time and the case is ripened appropriately. So I'd want to make sure that you're going and seeing the right professionals so that they can give you the right answers, because not all MRIs are created equally, and we don't know exactly what your issue is, so you need to get to those specialists so you can get that properly diagnosed.
We just hear pain and discomfort, but we don't know where that is, and there's certainly a lot of things that could be causing that are serious and wouldn't show on an MRI.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'd encourage him to find a lawyer to talk to.
Right, because the best thing, I tell people all the time, you want to be, you got to have credibility in any kind of claim, and so it's important that you give the information at but it's also important that you do it at the proper time. As in many things in life, timing can be everything. So you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and you're giving that information that gives a total picture. Because if you looked at those MRIs right now in isolation, it may look like, oh, there's nothing wrong. And the problem you can get there is, whereas at the end of the day, the story will tell through the full medical records, but you don't want to set your claim down on a bad path and have the adjuster taking a negative view of your claim prematurely. So it's important to get all that information. Make sure you're attending and seeing the right doctors to diagnose the issues that you're dealing with, and so that you can get that properly evaluated from a medical standpoint, because that's first and foremost, getting better, getting treated, and then you can properly have it taken through the claims process. But it's very important that you have guidance and that you can ask those questions. You got time, but you want to make sure you get on the right path from the get-go. So make sure you do that. Reach out to us or someone like us, and we can get that taken care of for you. But Marcus, fighting the insurance company comes in many different varieties. They have professionals working on their claims from the get-go. I know personally, a lot of us dealt with Hurricane Michael claims, and you get all of this paperwork, and they just throw it at you, and it can be very, very voluminous. It can be very, very overwhelming. And one of the best things about hiring someone like us, whether it be in a personal injury case or property damages, there's no upfront fees, there's no cost. I mean, that's something, explain a little bit how we typically work, just for example, in the personal injury context.
Sure, in a personal injury context, the way we work, we sit down with everybody and of course want to find out what's going on with them, but we work on a contingency fee basis. So if we don't earn anything until we collect something, and then we take a percentage of that. But yeah, we go over that with everybody when they come in and explain that to them, that you're not going to pay anything to meet with us. You're not going to, and you're not obligated to hire us if you do come in and meet with us. We're glad to sit down and talk with you about what your rights are and what we think we could do for you going forward.
Right, and and look, one thing we talk about here very frequently, and that we've actually done with many of our LawCall viewers, is going over insurance information with them and making sure you're properly insured in the first instance, because a lot of times the first time, especially with auto cases and in the homeowners arena as well, people are looking at their policies for the first time when the accident happens, and so they're not. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it a million times. I'm fully insured.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the legal definition of fully insured means that you just have the state mandatory minimums, which unfortunately under Florida law is only property damage liability in the amount of $10,000. And then the PIP no-fault benefits. And Marcus, just describe for the audience briefly what the no-fault benefits are, and that it doesn't exactly mean what it sounds like it means.
Well, yeah, like a lot of things we get from legislature, its name doesn't exactly describe what it is. But what the no-fault part of Florida's insurance is it covers up to $10,000 of medical damages if you meet certain criteria. Regardless of whose fault it was. And so people will come in saying, well, I know Florida's a no-fault state. Well, yeah, but just for that part, and after that is more where we get involved and looking at whose fault it is and who's going to be responsible.
Right, and it's critical in order to apply and to get the maximum amount of those no-fault benefits that you seek medical attention within a certain period of time. The Florida statutes require that to be within 14 days. And you got to do that or you lose those benefits, and you will be considered self-insured to the extent that you do not take advantage of that. So it's important that you go and seek attention promptly, and that's what you need to do anyway, because if you're hurting, you're not going to get better unless you deal with it. So it's best to get on that path and make sure you're taking care of yourself. Another provision that you can do in order to take care of yourself that is critical in Florida, because as we mentioned earlier, individuals are not mandated to carry bodily injury coverage, which is the type of coverage that you need to be able to look to in order to pursue a claim against somebody and have an insurance company step in and potentially provide you with compensation. The way you can protect against that is to buy uninsured motorist coverage. And Marcus, explain briefly how the uninsured motorist coverage works under Florida law.
Sure. Under Florida law, uninsured motorist is going to cover your damages that if they don't have bodily injury, because like you said, they don't have to, or if they don't have enough to cover your damages, then absolutely, that's when your own UM, and that's really that's what you pay for that you might get something back from.
Right.
A lot of what you pay for in car insurance is what would go to somebody else. But your UM is crucial because, as Ted said, so many people in Florida don't have any bodily injury, and you could certainly be left holding the bills.
Absolutely. We got our first caller, Laura from Dothan. Laura, go ahead with your question.
Hey, guys.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Laura.
Can they hear me?
Yes, Laura, I think
Yes.
you need to turn your TV down and then ask your question, please.
Okay, I've got it muted. Okay, I live in Dothan. I'm a 70-year-old woman who has been with a certain company with my car insurance, my house insurance, and a term life policy from this one company. And the term life was purchased about 30 years ago. And a few years ago, they sold it to somebody else and jacked it up, doubled the price. And I got a letter 2 weeks ago, and now it's 3 times the price. And I have a copy of my policy, and I can't take it to my lawyer because he passed away last month. Can you give me any advice at how I can say to this particular insurance company, how can you do this to me? You know, you triple it for just a term life. It's only $50,000.
Right, and Laura, what it sounds like is, and I'm guessing, and if you will, give us a call on Monday and we'll go over this with you in more detail, but what it sounds like to me, what is likely happening is that you have a policy that if it's 30, a term is for a certain set amount of time. And it sounds like it was likely either a 20 or a 30-year term, and that now you're extending that. And a lot of times what happens is you age, those premiums do go up and they get exponentially higher as you go further and further down that line. And so what I'm concerned is that now that you've met the initial term where it had a set rate and you're outside of that initial period, and now it's continuing to go on after that and further along, and that's what's causing that rate to go up. So if you give us a call, or we'll reach out to you. I think we have your number here now, and we can go over that with you, because make sure that what makes the most sense for you and going forward and most economical, because I know, especially if you have all of your insurance with the same company and you've had it for years, especially on the auto and the home side, a lot of times those prices, they don't necessarily give you any sort of loyalty discount.
No, absolutely not.
I know I recently had to change both my home and auto insurance because without having any claims, they both doubled.
Oh yeah, I have the same thing, and just wait till you have a 16-year-old.
Yeah, I'm looking at that here very shortly. So it's one of those things where you don't get any benefit for sticking around and paying every year. You have to look at it. You got to shop it, and the questions get asked, especially we were talking about the uninsured motorist coverage before that call. And everybody frequently will ask, well, if I make a claim on that, is my auto insurance going to go up? And my first response is always, your auto insurance is probably going to go up, but it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with that, because insurance is an actuarial thing, and it's based off a risk assessment. So if you're driving for work or something of that nature and you're on the road more, or if you've had more accidents, you're a riskier proposition, so you're going to get charged a higher premium. But also, as we all know and live in the state of Florida, insurance rates continue to increase, unfortunately, much more rapidly than other places. But with respect to an uninsured motorist claim, in order to be able to pursue that, you're having to be able to establish that someone else is at fault, not you. So that's not establishing that you're a more risky proposition with respect to that particular claim. So if you're going to need that coverage and you're going to pay for it, you need to use it if and when you have the ability to, if you're in an accident where somebody has hit you that does not have enough insurance. It's critical that you make sure and have that in place beforehand, though, because absent that coverage, a lot of times you're going to be left in a situation where you can't be fully compensated. But it's also important, we didn't talk about this earlier, but there's different forms of uninsured motorist coverage. You can have stacked or unstacked. And Marcus, just go briefly through the difference between those two types of insurance.
Sure. Yeah, an unstacked coverage just means the limits are going to be based off of one vehicle, whatever it is. If you've got $100,000 in uninsured motorists, then that's the most that you could get from that. But if you have it stacked, then if you've got multiple vehicles, then that part will multiply. So if you had 3 cars, then that $100,000 uninsured motorist coverage could pay up to $300,000.
Right, so that can be a significant change, and uninsured motorist coverage is so important that the Florida legislature has mandated if you are not going to have it, you have to sign a form called a selection rejection form denoting that you don't want to have it and whether you want to have it stacked or unstacked. And if the insurance company cannot produce that form upon request, then you will, by law, have stacked insurance in the same amount as you have in bodily injury coverage. And we've had several cases where the individual showed us their deck page. It did not have that they had uninsured motorist coverage, but when we requested that selection rejection form from the insurance company, they could not produce it, and as a result, they had that additional insurance coverage, which has been a lifesaver for several people. So that's some information that the adjuster is not going to voluntarily tell you.
No.
I mean, that's something that you're going to have to know about. You're going to have to request, and many times you have to stay on and request repeatedly. But eventually, we're going to get to the end of it, and we're going to figure out whether or not that's there. So that's just one example of why it's so important to have a professional helping you pursue your claim, because you know the insurance company is going to have professionals working on it from the moment go. So you want to make sure that you are properly equipped in order to make sure that you are taken care of and have what you need in order to get on the path to recovery. Just remember those phone lines are open, 850-392-1544, and we're able to take emails at lawcall@WMBB.com. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Law Call. During the break, we got a call from Marianne, I believe from Mariana. Marianne, go ahead with your question.
Hi, my mom was a driver in a pedestrian versus automobile, and the injured party is seeking to explore her assets, and there's a substantial amount of money in the bank because she lost her home in the tornadoes in January, and I'm just wondering if those assets are protected because they're considered her home.
Okay, Marion, that's a good question. A lot of that, there's a lot of details that could potentially play in that one way or another. But the long story short is anytime you have an accident like this, you have insurance that potentially protects you, but your liability is not limited to the amount of insurance. So very frequently there's an exploration and research done to whether or not there's the ability to make a personal contribution over and above that insurance policy. Florida law has certain protections that potentially come into play with respect to homestead protection, with respect to garnishments that may or may not be available if you're what's considered head of household, primary vehicles, things of that nature. With respect to funds continuing to maintain any type of protection with respect to homestead, there's a lot of factors that go into play on whether or not those have been commingled or not and whether they've been kept separately. There is the potential, depending on, for example, if you've sold your homestead and you keep those funds separately, there's some strong arguments if you are intending to buy a new homestead. With respect to whether or not insurance proceeds would be protected, I would recommend seeking the advice of a bankruptcy attorney or a creditor's right attorney to get a clearer answer on that. But that's something that you need to explore, and you need to go over and discuss that also with the insurance company. They should have an attorney your own insurance company should retain an attorney to help you discuss that and to go over that and make sure you utilize all of those resources, because that's something that people take for granted and don't understand necessarily. Is there's a lot of benefit. There's a lot of benefits under an insurance policy, but there's two main ones that come into play when you have an accident that hurts someone. One, they will pay to resolve the claim up to the limits of the policy coverage that you have purchased, but in addition, they will pay for an attorney to defend you. And many times, Marcus, that can be even more valuable, right? I mean, especially if you have a lower limit policy, let's say $25,000 or $50,000, and if you have to get into a lawsuit, it's very easy for legal fees to exceed that. So, you know, that's something you want to make sure and explore and utilize that benefit that you paid for with that premium. Mm-hmm. But very, very unfortunate situation. So you want to make sure and utilize anything you have at your disposal to make sure that you make the best decision for your family. Marcus, you know, in that pedestrian situation, you know, a lot of times people miss the fact that from that pedestrian's point of view, that his and his family's auto insurance can potentially be implicated. What are some of the factors that we look for in those situations?
Factors we look at, does he have uninsured motorists that could step in, or does the family member that he lives with have uninsured motorists? Because a lot of times those policies will cover you. So absolutely, just because you're not in your automobile doesn't mean that your auto insurance isn't in play. So yeah, those are some of the factors that we look at in that kind of situation.
That's very, very important, and you know, and also your PIP no-fault benefits are going to come into play. And if you have an unfortunate situation like this where someone maybe has even passed away, you have a $5,000 PIP death benefit that will pay in addition to any end-of-life medical expenses that are needed. And so that helps with some of those funeral type things and other costs of that nature. But the big one that can potentially be triggered is, like Marcus said, that uninsured motorist coverage, both on that individual's policy as well as any insurance that goes with any resident relatives that they live with. So it's always important to look at as many possible avenues. It doesn't mean you always have the ability to, but you need to know, because the biggest thing when you have something, especially a very tragic loss like this to happen, is you need to know what your options are. and you got to make an educated decision based off of all of that information. And it's tough. You know, you have all this flying at you, and you don't know what to do.
Yeah, and it's an emotional time, and that's why it's important to get a professional involved.
Right, and you want to make sure and not just look at one thing. You got to look at everything. Is there any potential that there was someone on the job? Was there any potential that there's any other type of coverage in play? One thing that Florida does, you know, we're showing this both in Florida and Alabama, and I'm licensed in both Florida and Alabama. And unlike Alabama, in Florida, if your name is on the title of that vehicle, you're just as liable as the driver, with some minor caveats there. But I mean, how does that work in Florida versus Alabama?
Well, I'm not licensed in Alabama, so I can't give you the contrast.
Right.
But yeah, in Florida, it's a dangerous instrumentality that you've put out there, and it's got your name on it, so whoever you've let drive it. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. If somebody steals your car, I don't know.
Right, it has to be with permission, but that's a big thing. For example, my name is on my car, my wife's name is on my car. I don't let my name go on her car, just in case. It's always better to be safe than sorry. And you know, while you know, with your kids, you're gonna have to have an adult's name on there. A kid can't own property until they're 18 and legally can contract. But I can guarantee you, as soon as my kids turn 18, I'm going to be signing that title over to them and taking my wife's name off of it and putting it in their names, because it's just better to be safe than sorry. Now, obviously, you still need to get adequate insurance to protect, but you always want to be. A vehicle is what I call a rolling liability, not an asset, because there's a lot of dangers, especially in a community like this or anywhere in the state of Florida. There's a lot of tourists coming down, and we have a lot of road construction. I got detoured around 390 on the way in here tonight. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of things going on, and things change from one day to the other. Traffic patterns are changing, so it's always, you know, look out, be careful. There's no reason to be in a hurry anywhere you're going. But those are if your name's on the vehicle, that's a very, very big potential liability. Conversely, in Alabama, it's a negligent entrustment type analysis. So there has to have been some sort of negligence in giving the person permission. So, for example, if you know the individual has been in 17 wrecks and has a suspended license, and you give them your car keys, that's very likely going to meet the definition of negligent entrustment. If you hand the keys to an intoxicated person, that absolutely is going to be negligent entrustment. So differing standards depending on where you are, but we'll go to a break now, and we will have the phone lines open. Welcome back to Law Call, and Marcus, we're down to the last part. We're down to the shout-outs. I'm sure you got a few people you want to say hello to.
Absolutely. Say hey to Leah, my wife, and Marley and John Ross at home. See y'all when I get there.
All right, and I've got a couple of shout-outs. I'm trying to get this right. Mr. Larry and Miss Pam actually went to a Spanish church of the Ministry of the Ark in Millville, and they were very well received and really loved the service this afternoon. So it was very good, and want to give them a shout-out. I want to give a shout-out to Gary G. Money Star. Gary, thank you for all the comments on Facebook. I think you did about 7, probably a new record for one show. Want to give a shout out to my dad, Randy, who turns 70 coming up. We're going to have a big party for him this Labor Day, so if you see anything too loud in Mexico Beach, I think he's already alerted the authorities so they won't arrest anybody, and hopefully we'll get home safely. Let's see, we got Judson and Vivian, and let's give a shout out to the Mosley football team. Had another good victory. Mosley was being cheered by Vivian. I think she helped him across the finish line, and then Judd's got his first football game for Bayhaven this Tuesday, so go get him this weekend, buddy. But we will be back next weekend, and be safe over Labor Day weekend.